Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I am here with our special guest, Kathy Archer. Thank you so much, Kathy, for coming on today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to Kathy today all about nonprofit leadership. We have so many social workers in nonprofits. I feel like that's so much of the work that we do. And a lot of people also wanting to kind of level up in their careers and take on leadership roles. So I'm really excited to talk to you more about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here. I am not a social worker. I will put that out there right off the
And
bat.
that's
Although I did,
okay.
yes, but I did dream of being a social worker at one point, and life circumstances went a different direction. I actually have a child and youth care background, but I have spent many, many years in the nonprofit sector alongside many social workers and working with social workers and working in the fields that many social workers are definitely, as you said, involved in. And what I
Mhm.
have experienced and what I've noticed is so many of those women are drowning in their work. There's
Yeah.
just so much overwhelm. There's so much unknown, and we're not taught things. If
Hmm.
any of your listeners are in leadership positions, they likely moved into leadership positions because they came from the front line like I did, and you move your way up.
Yes.
But nobody
Hmm.
teaches you how to lead. And so you're
Hmm.
using your, skills that you learned in university or college or the book you read
Hmm.
on social work to try and run a team. And
Hmm.
it feels weird, wrong. It's not quite the same, and we don't
Hmm.
know why. And then we struggle with imposter syndrome. And
Hmm.
so I experienced that in my own work. And when I hit a couple of big leadership lows, I realized that as I learned and grew and developed myself, I could probably turn around and help more women leaders do that. So that's
Hmm.
what I do now.
Yeah, that is so true because I even remember in grad school when I was getting my MSW, you had to pick a specific pathway. And
Yes.
so I knew I wanted to be a therapist, but I was like, long term, I'd like to be in leadership and like run programs or
Yeah.
organizations or something, but I had to pick clinical social work. And I'm just, but then you get into that weird spot of like, if you choose the more macro or like leadership path, if you're in that position, a lot of people still want you to have that direct experience so you know what they've been through and you can
Yeah.
relate to them. So it kind of puts people in a tough spot. So I'm really excited to get into it today. Um, what originally got you like into this world of work and into the nonprofit world?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I mean, I dreamed of being a social worker when I was a kid. That was my plan, was doing that. I'm not sure that there was any specific thing, but I always just sort of had that desire to help other people, sort of be supportive. When I went to college, I took a child and youth care diploma, which gave me the ability to work primarily with youth I was, in group homes, chasing kids who ran AWOL, did the
Hmm.
whole restraint world, which I would never want to, venture into again.
Rough
Uh,
out there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I did that. And then I was lucky enough. The group home I was working in closed down. I was lucky enough to get into family support work. And that's where it
Mhm.
started to shift more for me, rather than trying to sort of um, just piece together what was going on with these poor kids. I
Mhm.
was able to influence the parents. And I started to see that there was a
Huge.
different way of changing things rather than trying to, just sort of the old medical model, fix whatever's broken.
Hmm.
Well, maybe there's a different way, right? Maybe there's a different way
Hmm.
of teaching and learning and guiding. And so that's where I sort of fell in love with that world of how do we help people become better versions of themselves. What I then
Hmm.
realized was, as I said, I can do that for the staff that I work with, and I can do that for the leaders
Yeah.
that report to me. And now that's what I do is how do we be better versions of ourselves? And when I started to
Hmm.
sort of shift that lens from something's broken and how do I fix it to we're not necessarily
Hmm.
broken, we're just not using everything that we have given to us and our skills and so that's
Hmm.
kind of the path that I took was from, like I say, group homework to family support
Hmm.
work to leadership, and that's kind of
Hmm.
the mindset that went with it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Did you have certain like expectations as you were kind of transitioning into more leadership roles on what it would look like? And what was kind of the reality of that? Did it align with what you expected, or was there some big things that were like, whoa, this is not what
Yeah,
I thought?
yeah. Well, one of the big challenges I had was I moved from peer to leader. And so I had
Yeah.
watched my leaders do their thing. And I thought, oh, there's some challenges and some, stuff happens, but they have navigated it and they've learned it. It was a different experience when I was, friends with these people and on the same level with these people to now reporting to them. And I was young, I
Hmm.
wasn't even 30 yet. So, I had this weird, I mean, I wasn't as mature as I would have liked to have been. I was struggling at
Hmm.
that point. I already had 4 kids, so I was, busy as a mom,
Okay.
trying to move into leadership. So I think the biggest challenge was the peer to leader, but then also the magnitude of responsibility. It wasn't so much, I mean, the schedule changed, but suddenly the
Hmm.
decisions were bigger. The outcome of those decisions were more. There was more pressure. There was
Hmm.
more of everything, right? I never had to worry about money and budgets and responsibilities for people. And
Yeah.
the emotional weight of it all was more than I realized would be there.
Mm. Yeah, that's fair. Was that so in becoming like going from peer to leader, did that lead to just like some funky relationships with people that used to be peers? Like, how did you kind of navigate that transition?
Not very well in every situation. There was one situation where I very vividly remember yelling at my employee.
Hmm.
Again, I was young, I was struggling, lots going on,
Right. Yeah.
right? I didn't have the emotional intelligence that I wish I'd had then. And so, yeah, there's
Hmm.
this power between the two of us because we had been equals. Now I sort of had more power, and it was this, I could feel this power struggle constantly. And I remember, paper thin walls, like there's no insulation in these walls. It's just the border or the puck board, right? Um,
Hmm.
and I remember I shut the door and I mean, I remember it as yelling. I'm sure I wasn't, yelling, but my voice was
Hmm.
raised. And it wasn't long after that she quit. And so there was, that sort of sequence of those people who I had been peers with over the next year or two, most of them trickled out and left. And I think, yeah,
Mm.
they realized that, they could probably get different supports in different places. Small, they weren't gonna advance anytime soon. They knew I was in it for the long
Hmm.
haul. And then there was some that we just settled in and we figured it out. And those were
Hmm.
the ones that we really developed that stronger relationship with and learned how to
Hmm.
navigate the power dynamics. But part of that was we honed in on the mission and the vision. We were able to step back and go, okay, what are we really here for? What's the difference we
Hmm.
want to make? And when we could focus on that instead of our differences, that helped us move
Hmm.
forward.
Yeah, that bigger kind of alignment amongst the team to do
Yeah,
something. That's
yeah,
powerful.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Was there, especially, I mean, as maybe people were leaving or kind of saying, oh, maybe this isn't the place for me anymore. And even outside of that, were you dealing with imposter syndrome? Because I feel like every social worker I talk to is just like, I have so much imposter syndrome. I don't know what to do.
Huge imposter syndrome. So again, I move up. I'm young, have been doing the work, but not leadership. Within
Hmm.
less than 6 months, the staff brought the union in. I had zero knowledge of how to deal with the union, and it wasn't me
Yeah.
particularly, and it wasn't even our site. It was a bigger thing that had happened.
Hmm.
So, I'm thrown into this craziness. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I didn't have the competence. So I often teach in my first book, Mastering Confidence, I talk about, again, we move from frontline into leadership without the competence, we don't have the skills to lead. So I didn't have the
Hmm.
skills, but I also didn't have the thoughts process like imposter syndrome. Like, am I supposed to be here? I don't know what I'm doing. People seem to think I'm
Right.
an idiot, right? Um,
Hmm.
so that first sort of year was really, really hard. And I
Hmm.
hit rock bottom just after Christmas. Again, staff had brought the union in, had a Christmas party, like next to no one showed up. I'm like, do I
Yeah.
even want to be here? What's going on? Depression sort of hit. So I remember sitting at the
Hmm.
doctor's office, early January before I'd gone back to work, and I'm like bawling, right? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Right? He puts me on antidepressants. I decide, no, I'm going back, right? Like, because
Hmm.
again, this is my heart of hearts where I want to be. But what I
Yeah.
did differently when I went back was I went back to school. That's when I started taking tons
Mhm.
and tons of courses. And that's when I started my leadership degree. And I also went and started working out. I was hadn't been,
Mm.
doing that kind of stuff. Started doing more walks at lunchtime so I would get the sunshine,
Hmm.
right? Like I started doing all of those other things. But the learning was a huge transitional piece for me because once I
Yeah.
started understanding what leadership was and what it wasn't, um, how all of the things I'd learned about families and children and development and still all came to play, but in different ways, right? Um,
Hmm.
and so learning was the key for me to start getting those imposter syndrome thoughts in check and go, no, actually, I
Hmm.
do belong here. I didn't know what
Hmm.
I didn't know, right? That's why I did what I did. Learn more,
Hmm.
try new things, and that's what started to help me shift out of it.
Oh, that's huge. Do you view leadership more than like as a skill that can be built or something that like someone naturally has or doesn't have?
It's interesting because I'm a certified Gallup Strengths coach, and leadership is one of the talents that some people have naturally. And so, yes, some people naturally have that.
Mhm.
They just show up in the room and they take over, and you
Yeah.
like, yeah, do your thing, right? Often that's not true leadership in terms of organizational leadership, right?
True. Hmm.
So that kind of leadership can be learned. And it's learned again by the skill development, by understanding what your role is. But ultimately, true leadership is personal development growth, right? Like if
Hmm.
we're not growing and developing ourselves, we can't lead other people because when we're thinking about leadership, you have you have to make a decision. We were talking before we hopped on about, your kid was sick and do I take a sick day or not? Right? Like it's a decision we have to make. When we
Yeah.
move into leadership and suddenly we're also still making that decision, right? I
Hmm.
remember lots of times I had sick kids and I would be hopping on a plane flying to the city, right? And I got this
Hmm.
sick kid. Do I go? Don't I go? The weight of
Yeah.
those decisions are more. And so if we're not highly in tune with our values, like I need to make a
Hmm.
value-based decision here. What's really most important to me? And for me,
Mm.
sometimes I had a wonderful babysitter. I'd like take the kid in the puke bucket and she'd be like, okay, go have a good day, right? And I'd be like, thank you, right? Um, Other days I'd be like, no, I need to stay home with my kid. But to
Yeah.
to make that kind of decision and then to flip it around, you're then also making decisions about, do we shut this program down? Do I
Mm.
let this staff go? And so again, you're
Big, big
big
decisions.
decisions, yeah. And if you're not able to know I'm a people pleaser or I'm a perfectionist
Yeah.
or I don't like conflict or whatever the thing is, if you haven't
Hmm.
done that work to understand your triggers and what's important to you, it's really hard to make those leadership decisions, to
Hmm.
have those tough conversations, to, you know, bring your emotions to work, which is incredibly important, but in a managed way.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so yeah, that's the shift is the personal development journey we have to make.
Yeah, that's so true. What do you see like, because you work with a lot like women in leadership and nonprofit
Yep.
leadership, what are some of those biggest like internal things that they deal with? Like, because you mentioned perfectionism or people pleasing, and I'm like, these are big things I know a lot of social workers kind of struggle with, and it's sometimes what got them into the work, but what can be a very
Yeah.
big double-edged sword for them.
Yeah, yeah. In the first like 2 pages of my character-driven leadership book, I talk about pleasing, performing, and perfecting. So
Mm.
we're people pleasers, right? We want to make everybody happy. And by the nature of our social worky kind of background, that's just who we are,
Yeah.
right? We're
Hmm.
caretakers, we're nurturers. So that's what we do. Um, Uh, Pleasing, then performing is we're often overachievers with high expectations of ourselves and others, right?
True.
Um, like 100% all the way. And so I've often had to teach people after I had to learn it, not
Hmm.
everything is 100%. Some of the things we need to do are like a 70, right? Good enough.
Hmm.
Pass it on. When I took my team through accreditation, right? Like push, 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 push. We have to get 100. We have to get 100. We have to get
Hmm.
100. At what cost? we're still good if we
Right.
got 95. Like if we made one mistake, right, and one little thing we had to work on, we're still okay. So,
Hmm.
you have to kind of go, is this a decision or something I need to push through? Because again, it's not just us that we have those expectations of, it's the people around us. And when we have those incredibly high expectations on our partners and our kids, also, right,
Hmm.
it causes problems. So pleasing, performing, and then perfecting, right? That
Hmm.
this kind of goes back to imposter syndrome, that fear of God forbid anybody see any of my flaws. Like that
Oh.
anybody sees anything wrong with me, right?
Hmm.
Like whether it's a hair at a place or for me it's spelling and
Yeah.
grammar, I'm horrible at. Yes, I've written 2 books, but that's the okay, I don't have to do that. That's what somebody else's job is for. That's what we have AI for, to
Hmm.
correct our grammar and spelling now, right?
Hmm.
Thank
Right.
God, thank God for that. Uh, but when I stop going, I don't have to be that perfect person, that
Hmm.
it's okay to have flaws, that those flaws actually make me who I am. I used to,
Hmm.
well, I mean, I grew up, my mom would call me a crybaby, right? So there was this, oh my God, I can't show any emotion, and I'm a hugely emotional
Yeah.
person. So, that's that one sort of belief that I brought into leadership was don't bring emotions in. But
Hmm.
that's a strength of mine. It's a gift of mine. And when I can
Yeah.
learn to manage and navigate those, then that's where compassion comes from. That's where trust comes from. That's where being able to see things from all perspectives comes from. It's because you bring those emotions in a managed way.
Yeah. It's really to me saying too, like I'm really hearing you say about like leading authentically,
Yes.
where I feel like a lot of people like they're being taught about leadership from different gurus or something in a very one size fits all kind of way of like this is what makes a good leader and a bad leader. And I think maybe sometimes there's some truth to like some qualities that are important or like ways of approaching things that are valuable, but you're really saying like no, you can like exist as you are and be a leader. Like you don't have to like change who you are fundamentally. It's important to just show up as yourself because you're kind of chosen to be in these roles for a reason, and that's very valuable.
In my book, Character Driven Leadership, I talk about the 4 fundamentals of leadership. Be yourself, develop yourself, take care of yourself, and teach others to do the same. And that be
Mhm.
yourself is that authenticity. It's your energy, your essence, your emotions, right? So the essence of who you are. If I am really good at being creative, and I think that that's wrong in leadership, like don't bring any of that in, ooh,
Mhm.
then you're losing your creative thinking. You're losing your ability to be
Yeah.
innovative, right? You might have creative ways of teaching something at a staff meeting. Well, that's the essence of who you are, right?
Hmm.
Same as the essence of who I am as an emotional person. Like you don't want to shut that off, right? So yeah,
Hmm.
authenticity is key. Who are you? What are your strengths, your gifts, your talents? Be that person. So be yourself, develop yourself. I talked about learning is like number one. Um,
Hmm.
take care of yourself, like wellness fundamentals. If we're not
Yes.
taking care of ourselves, like that's a whole other conversation. But then
Hmm.
teaching other people to do that too, right? We don't want a group of employees that are all identical. I want
Yeah.
somebody who's this kind of a thinker and who has this strength and who does this, and this way. That's what makes us an incredible
Hmm.
team. And so helping people identify their strengths and show up that way is way more powerful.
Hmm. No, it's very true because I I can't remember what I was listening to, but I was listening to someone talk about like building their practice, like their private practice. And it kind of sounded like they just wanted every therapist in the practice to just be a copy paste version of themselves, which
Yeah,
I'm sure they thought was something there.
yeah, yeah.
But it really takes away from what every single person is bringing. And of course, like maybe you want certain values and things aligned and things like that, but we're not robots either. Like people are going to show up as they are, whether or not you approve of it.
Well, and
Mhm.
that's again going back to where leaders need to do that work to understand that. Because if you're
Yeah.
having a conversation, and let's say you're talking about maybe you're putting on a conference or something, and again, somebody
Hmm.
comes in with this creativity kind of mindset, and somebody else is very practical, you're probably going to
Yeah.
have a conflict. And your job is to go, oh, you're valuing like us moving through this quickly and making sure that the experience is quick
Hmm.
and practical for the participant. You're saying, yeah, but what about some create, right? And so that's where
Hmm.
most of the conflicts happen is when we're bringing those different values or different traits together and they're not mixing, right? And
Hmm.
it's your job is to go, okay, well, let's hear this part. Now this part.
Hmm.
How do we all put this together? And
Yeah.
it's not always easy.
No. But I like that framework of we can put it together. Like we're just, you're coming as a leader, coming from that perspective of this is what's going on. It's not bad. Like we're just trying to understand each other and figure it out and like come to a space where we can like unite and
Yeah.
move forward.
And again, back to our social work, whatever, post-secondary training we
Hmm.
have. Isn't that what we're taught? Like the people are
Very true.
unique and, like
Hmm.
find their strengths uh and so again, I think some of that common sense in terms of the work that we do seems to fly out
Hmm.
the window. You were saying earlier about we've kind of learned leadership from gurus, right?
Hmm.
And so a lot of the leadership models are male oriented. They come from, the Navy SEALs kind of background, right?
Yes.
Command and control. That's not what we're doing now. That's not who we are, and
Hmm.
it's certainly not what the world needs. And so
Yeah.
we want to bring, dare I say, the soft skills into leadership and
Mm.
lead in a different way.
That is very true. Because there are also, it reminds me of that conversation of like outgoing people and shyer people where like I was pretty
Right.
shy growing up, and I think there were times where a lot of shy people can often be really overlooked and they're kind of forgotten as like really valued or creative or all these things, and it's like, well, no, they're just bringing a different skill set or perspective or
Yeah.
whatever, and like you don't have to look a certain way or show up in a certain way to be a valued leader. You can still
No,
be a great
no.
leader.
No. And we think that, you have to ask these questions, like be assertive in meetings and
Mm-hmm.
no, maybe I'm a thinker. I have lots of clients and lots of people I know who need time to think and process. So
Yeah.
so that's okay. Let me get back to you with the answer. But then this is where integrity comes in. Then follow up. Do what you say you're going to do. Walk your
Mm,
talk, right? If you say I
that's
need some
true.
time to think, then come back with the answer in an hour or 2 or 3 days. But yeah, you can still be that kind of person.
That's true. You were talking earlier, so there's this piece of like take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Now, I think of a lot of people in leadership as always being very busy because they have a lot to do because they have very serious, important work that they're doing. So
Yeah.
what does that even look like, especially as you're transitioning into leadership? Maybe you've been a like you're stepping into a nonprofit leadership role or something. How does someone maintain that balance and actually take care of themselves?
First, you have to see it as a fundamental part of leadership. It's not a nice to have, it's
Hmm.
not an extra, it's not something you do after work. If you
Hmm.
want to lead well, you have to manage your energy, right? Not your time,
Hmm.
your energy. So you start the day, your feet haven't even hit the floor and you're already checking your emails and you're running through your day and meeting to meeting and back to back and blah, 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 blah.
Hmm.
And then somebody says something to you at 3 o'clock and you snap. Well, you
Hmm.
haven't taken a break. You haven't ate anything other than maybe carbs. You
Hmm.
got nothing left, right? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're on your way home and you're like hitting the drive-through and forget the workout in the evening because there's nothing left, right? Um,
Hmm.
but it's a fundamental for leadership because you cannot demonstrate compassion if you're burning out. You can't
Hmm.
think you're when you're stressed out all the time, your peripheral vision kind of like is gone. You're like tunnel
Yeah.
vision, right? So you can't
Hmm.
see things from all sides. One of the most important components of building trust is caring and compassion. So,
Hmm.
like, do you actually have some empathy left in you? So if you're not taking care of your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual well-being, you can't be a good
Hmm.
leader. Like it's just impossible, right? You're just
Yeah.
like go, go, go. I always talk about whacking moles, right? Like email and meeting and da da da. That's all you're doing. Like you're just but
Hmm.
you don't even know if they're your moles to hit or if it's the right time to be whacking the moles. You're just fighting fires all day long. That's
That's
all you're
very true.
yeah, yeah. And so wellness has to be seen as a fundamental tool, skill, thing in leadership. And so when
Hmm.
I talk about wellness, I talk about wellness at work, not after
Mhm.
work, but wellness at work. Taking lunch breaks, taking stretch breaks, all of those kind of things. But I talk about it in terms of micro moments. You know, making sure that you have 2 or 3 minutes between meetings to go to the bathroom, get a snack, move your body. Making
Mhm.
sure that you have time to drop some of your thoughts down so that, you're not scrambling in between things. That you're eating food that's going to nourish your body, like proteins,
Mhm.
right? Again, we're carb heavy world, carbon pot, right? Like
Yeah.
we're drinking our cola and having our donut. That's not feeding your mind in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
Um, but taking those micro moments, I talk about spiritual or emotional. Maybe it's taking a moment to do some deep breathing or to, water your plants in your office. Or I used to walk around the block and say to my admin, I'm going for a walk, and like literally 4 minutes, right? But
Mhm.
enough to get outside in the sunshine, step away from my desk, roll my shoulders back, do that kind of thing. I would do squats at the photocopier. I'd be like waiting for the photocopier and I'd be doing my squats,
That's
right?
great.
My lunges back down the hall to the office. Like you cannot wait till the end of the day to think that you can pour back in everything that's been drained from you all day. So it has to be
Mhm.
those micro moments of wellness throughout your workday.
Mm. Oh, that's very true. I'm loving the image of doing squats at the copier. I think that's incredible.
We still have photocopiers. It's been a while since I've been in them.
That's awesome. But I think that's true. That was like that's the part of just being very present, where I think a lot
Yeah.
of social workers, whether they're in leadership or not, we get stuck into just the absolute chaos of the work, and we're just like running from place to place. And there's an element of just slowing down
Yeah.
where you still know I'm going to get the work done. The sense of urgency is not going to make me go any faster or change anything. So I can
No.
actually just approach things more mindfully, and then at the end of the day feel a lot better.
Well, and you're then role modeling that for your team and creating that culture. So, you just said that sort of slowing down. You've probably heard people say, start your team meeting with a moment of silence. You can do that, sure. But you can also just
Mhm.
walk in and say, hey, I just need a minute to collect myself. And you can take a second to
That's
take a
true.
deep breath, right? You don't have to like make it this
Mhm.
kumbaya experience for the team. You can just sort of
True.
say, whew, I've been busy. I bet you have too. Let's just take a moment, do what
Mhm.
you need to do. Just to, there's sort of that, I talk about sort of the Kool-Aid. There's always that
Yeah.
residual stain from the last meeting, whether it's the
Mhm.
energy or the emotions or the thoughts that like let that settle for a moment and then start the
Mhm.
next thing, right? Create
Mhm.
transitions is one of the things. If you could just create more mindful transitions from one thing to the next, you'll
Mhm.
you'll change your experience and everybody else's dramatically.
Yeah. I love that the idea of like modeling too, just because it's a lot more human and it feels a lot less corporate of just like,
Yeah.
of all right, team, we're gonna do this exercise, which, I maybe some of those have their benefit, but this is just like we're humans doing a very human job. Like you're just
Yeah.
showing up as that and understanding it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like, I mean, literally, just let me catch my breath, please, guys. Like, yeah. I mean, at the same time, again, I think, when you're role modeling that, again, back to integrity. Do you start the meeting on time? Yes, so that's the type of person I am. I start my meeting on time. But then again,
Mhm.
you need to then think about then how do I make sure that I've buffered in that 2 minutes before the meeting's supposed to start on time? Because I don't want to be
Mhm.
known as the leader that never starts meeting till 5 minutes after, right?
Mhm.
And maybe you do and maybe you
Yeah.
don't care. That's entirely fine. That's your style. But just make
Mhm.
sure that you're walking your talk, right? If you're saying
Yeah.
start meetings on time, I expect everybody
Mhm.
else to be on time, and then you're like, "Oh, I just need a minute." And they're going to roll their eyes and be like, "Of course she does," right?
Right. That is very, very true. Hmm. I'm loving this talk, Kathy. This is great. This is awesome. What have been, because I mean, you work with, again, like a lot of women in leadership and nonprofit roles. What have been the biggest myths about leadership that you've seen maybe other people hold, or even you had yourself when you came into leadership?
Yeah. I think one of the ones was shut your emotions off at the door, right? That
Hmm.
that's been a big one, and
That's
we've
so true.
yeah, yeah. Like I cannot tell you how many times somebody says to me, "I just don't want to be emotion. I just don't want to bring my emotions
Hmm.
in. I want to just shut my emotions off. I just want to leave my emotions." I'm like,
Hmm.
whoa, 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 whoa. trust is an emotion. Don't you want to like
Hmm.
feel trust, right? Uh,
Hmm.
the most important part that people are looking for is that you care about them as a human being. There's some
Yeah.
emotions in care. It could be gratitude. Th those are important pieces. And so I think we've learned that emotion is a weakness, and especially in
Hmm.
women, emotion is seen as, that vulnerable place that we don't want to be. And Brene Brown has debunked that myth 1,000 times over, but I
Hmm.
don't know that we truly believe it still. And I don't know
Hmm.
that enough people understand what it means. And again, this goes back to why we need to grow ourselves individually in that personal development. When
Yeah.
when you can sit down and you can journal about, oh, I was just triggered there. Like what happened? What was going on? What
Hmm.
was the value or the thing that triggered me? Oh, arrogance. Oh, interesting. Arrogance. What does it
Hmm.
feel like when I'm triggered by arrogance, right? And you can start to play around with that. Then you can go, oh, that's the emotion I'm feeling. Okay.
Hmm.
Do I want that emotion? Maybe,
Hmm.
right? I always say to people, anger is not wrong. It's how you
Yeah.
express anger, right? You can be angry as a leader.
Hmm.
100% you can be angry. You can be pissed off. You can be annoyed. You can be irritated. You can be embarrassed. You can be whatever you want. None of those are wrong. It's being aware
Hmm.
of that, so you can go, ooh, how do I want to express this? I was
Hmm.
talking to somebody recently and they were really triggered, and I said to them, you can say in the middle of a meeting, you know what, feeling really triggered, I need to like just take a break and like just catch myself. Or you can just say to
Hmm.
somebody, I just need to go to the washroom. Like you don't even have to admit that you're
Yeah.
triggered, right? Like just
That's true. Hmm.
like take the break and
Hmm.
regroup, take a couple deep breaths, just settle yourself down.
Hmm.
And then you can go back and say, you know what? I'm kind of angry about this, but in a measured way,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
the message is going to come across a lot different. So I think that's one of the big sort of things that we come in. And then again, the other one is thinking that because we've been good at what we've been doing, we should be good at leadership. It's a whole different set of
Love
skills.
that.
It is,
Hmm.
right? Um,
Hmm.
so not expecting yourself to know it. So again, being a confident leader starts with competence. You need the
Hmm.
skills. And so you need the skills of how do you, I mean, for me, spreadsheets. I had zero understanding of what spreadsheets were, how to,
Yeah.
make formulas. So I went and took a course. I'm like, sign me
Hmm.
up. Um,
Yeah.
but the soft skills, understanding emotions and conflict resolution and how to navigate
Hmm.
those tough conversations, the competence of those skills is important. But then you have to have the
Hmm.
courage to practice them. So we look at athletes and they're in the gym, training, training, training,
Yeah.
training. We take the conflict resolution course on, Thursday. Man, you better be good at it by Monday. Really?
Mm.
Like, I still don't, I need some time to practice it. And it
Hmm.
takes courage to practice that. When I took my coach training my next in line team lead was so good. I said to her, look, I need to practice these skills. And so,
Yeah.
I'd be doing supervision with her and I'd be like, okay, I got to try a coaching question and it's going to come out all wrong. Or I'd read it off the
I
piece
love
of
this.
paper, right? And she would
Hmm.
play with me. She would let me
Hmm.
practice, right? Because we had built that
Hmm.
relationship. And so competence, right? First, you got to learn
Hmm.
it, courage to practice. Then you've got to work with your mind, whereas the confidence comes in.
Hmm.
You know this, you've practiced this, you've got this. And
Hmm.
so it's the pathway to sort of confident leadership starts with you actually got to learn some things about leadership first.
Yeah. There's kind of that acceptance for the uncomfortability in the practicing too, where I think a lot of social workers, I'm thinking about when I was doing my clinical social work classes and we had to role play in front of the whole class, like a therapeutic
Ugh.
technique. Or I remember like being in my field practicum, being in a therapy session with my client, and I'm just thinking in my head, all right, let me try this skill I just learned. But it
Ah,
was the most valuable stuff I ever did. Like I hated it in the
yes.
moment because I'm like, this is so embarrassing, this is so vulnerable, like all this stuff. But now years looking back, I'm like that. I'm so glad we incorporated that because even though it was so uncomfortable, that's where the skills really developed and where I was able to become the therapist I needed to become.
Yes, yes. I chuckle about that. Somebody was I'm working with a coach who's working on his certification. And he's like, "How do you know the questions to ask?" I'm like, "Because I used to have sticky notes all over my desk. I didn't know the questions, right? I mean,
Yeah. Hmm.
I was on the phone, not Zoom at the time. And yeah, my desk was plastered with these coaching questions, right? And I would just be like, I'll practice this one now because I
Hmm.
didn't know, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I feel that's so powerful for I think so many social workers to learn too is first, I think there is being a social worker equips you for leadership in some ways, and that social work skills can be really valuable.
Yes.
But to still accept of like this is still a new thing, and we were never really taught leadership really at all in social work, unless that was your specific path. And
Yeah.
for most social workers, it's not. And even then, I don't really know what that looks like in social work school. But so there's going to be a huge learning curve, and so you need to give yourself that grace and that time to develop because you were
Yeah.
entering into a new role. You're not going to know it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the one thing that we don't do as leaders. And again, because we've not been taught this, we have performance appraisal goals. The
Hmm.
organization is like, here's the goals we're working on, and it's, like build a new program or, you know, figure out your policy manual or whatever it is. I
Hmm.
work with the students and clients that I work with. I help them create what I call their personal and professional learning curriculum. So,
Hmm.
what do you need to learn? And where are you going to learn it from? And when are you going to learn it? So, if you're learning
Hmm.
emotional intelligence, how are you going to learn that? Right? Maybe you're going to take a
Hmm.
course or read a book or listen to some podcasts. Okay, great. Please don't think you're just randomly going to find the time to do that, right?
Hmm.
When are you going to schedule? Just like you would if you were back in university. What's the
Hmm.
class time that you're doing that in? What's the measurement? How do you know when you're better at emotional intelligence? Or maybe you're
Hmm.
setting boundaries and you want to get better. Okay, what's the measurement? Right? Like, and
Hmm.
so really creating a more robust kind of goal curriculum kind of framework, not something you have to spend
Hmm.
hours and hours on, but just sit down and go, what does it mean to be better at doing one-to-one supervisions? How will I
Hmm.
know I'm better at doing one-to-one supervisions? Because if you don't
Yeah.
actually know, right, then it's just kind of this nice to have. And a
Hmm.
year from now, it'll still be on your goal list.
That's very true. It's a good anchor too. Like, it's the thing that holds us accountable to be like, and also just makes us feel empowered, and we can feel so lost in the sauce of leadership
Yeah.
and all this stuff where it's just like, gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. But we can point to this and be like, oh, but like I'm working on it. I have this plan.
Yes.
Like I know
Yes.
strategically what I need to be doing and what I'm growing in.
Yeah. And it also helps with the imposter syndrome because then you realize I don't
Mhm.
know it and nobody taught it to me.
Yeah.
My fault,
Hmm.
right? I just haven't learned it. And yeah,
Hmm.
look at me, learning it, right? Growth mindset. Way we go.
True. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Wow. This has been so, I'm feeling energized, Kathy. I'm like ready
Ah,
to lead a million organizations right now.
that's what
For those listening, and this is always the hardest question I ask on every episode, but what is just like one piece of advice you would leave for those listening that are maybe wanting to pursue leadership? Maybe they're already in leadership. What's just
yeah.
like one kind of maybe tangible thing they can do to just move forward?
I would say people are going to hate me for this. Get a journal. Write things down.
Mhm.
Uh, Everything from when you're pissed off to the moments of gratitude to what you're learning,
Mhm.
right? Think of it again like as if you're back in school. Think of it as your learning journal. Write things down and you'll start to
Mhm.
grow, right? The more you write, and you don't have to think of it as a dear diary. It can be like I say a notebook if you want to frame it that way. Lots of people in paths and history would sort of write memos to themselves, or like I say, have your problem and your brainstorming ideas,
Mhm.
whatever. But write things down about how you're leading, how you're growing, how you're becoming better, and you'll start to make some
Mhm.
big shifts.
Very true. Having that time to just reflect and
Yes,
it's very
yes.
powerful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
In the back of Character-Driven Leadership for Women, there are 3 or 4 pages of journal prompts. So
Oh,
just that,
wonderful.
that way to get you kind of doing that journaling to get you really thinking about leadership in a different way.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for coming. This has been very valuable. I'm really excited. We don't have a lot of uh like social workers I've had on the podcast or anyone on the podcast really
Yeah.
talking about leadership and like stuff outside of the micro work that we
Right.
do. And
Yes,
so
yes.
I know this is so valuable because this is this is the stuff that we're all a part of. We're all a part of nonprofits and organizations and everything.
Well, thank you, Laura. I think the more that you get this stuff out there for like you say, whether you're an aspiring leader or new to leadership or you've been in it for a while, the more you start to understand that, yeah, it's just about growing yourself nonstop for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's
Woohoo!
it. Just adopt the growth mindset and you're on the right path. Thank you though for the opportunity to share my ideas.
Of course. Where can the listeners kind of keep up with you and what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kathyarcher.com is my website. Feel free to follow me there. I'm on all the socials at Kathy D. Archer. And so LinkedIn, Instagram are my favorite places to hang out. And you can
Fun.
find my books, Character Driven Leadership and Mastering Confidence, wherever you buy your books.
Amazing. Okay. And for those listening, all that will be linked below so you can easily just keep up with Kathy. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right. Well, for those listening, feel free to follow, subscribe, like the podcast, share it with another social worker, share it with maybe a leader in your life, and we will see you next time. Bye.